It's great to be catching up again with the Chamber of Mines and Energy CEO, Rebecca Knoll. How are you today, Rebecca?
Oh, really well, thanks, Ricky, and lovely to be speaking to you and your listeners.
Oh, always a pleasure. And the mining industry is a big one in regional South Australia, and we do extract a lot of uranium here in South Australia. And we're almost every week someone raises the question of where are we heading, if at all, on nuclear energy. And it seems like there's an appetite, according to data you've released today, that there is an appetite in South Australia to talk about nuclear energy being part of our energy mix.
There certainly is, Ricky, and let's just go back a step. South Australia produces 80% of Australia's uranium and 25% of the world's uranium. So we do have a uranium industry here already, and that's fantastic. The conversation about nuclear is one that's been bubbling for a long period of time. Many of your listeners will remember the 2016 Royal Commission into Nuclear Power. And what a lot of people remember from that nuclear commission is that it wasn't commercially viable, but that actually wasn't the whole sentence. The whole sentence was nuclear power may be necessary along with other low-carbon generation technologies, and it would be wise to plan now to ensure that nuclear power would be available should it be required. And that's exactly where we are today, Ricky. It's required. We are in a climate crisis. There's no denying that. We're seeing climate catastrophes around the globe and even on a doorstep here. We need to rapidly decarbonise, and that now is the issue. So we need to move to a low-carbon electricity system, and we need to get there quickly. So when you're in that sort of position, you need to look at what technologies are on the table and what could we potentially look at. Now, nuclear, of course, is a key low carbon intense or zero carbon fuel. So we need to be looking at that. So for SACOM, it's like, okay, well, that's great if we need to look at it, but what does the community think and where is the community sentiment at? So that's the reason why we did the survey. We were really seeking to understand whether the South Australian public wanted or were open to a balanced conversation on nuclear. Our survey looked at 600 adults, 400 in Greater Adelaide, 200 in the region. Of course, you're getting your gender mixes and socioeconomic mixes right. And what this survey found is more than 6 in 10 adults, 63%, agree that given the recent cost and reliability issues of the Australian electricity market, all energy sources, including nuclear, should be on the table for consideration. So that's a pretty overwhelming majority. We've got 63% of South Australians really wanting to look at nuclear.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, not only on the climate front, but there's also the issue, of course, of the supplies that have been restricted by Russia and due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I guess that's also brought to the fore of people's mind the need for South Australia and indeed Australia to have stronger energy security.
Yeah, stronger energy security, and also we need reliability, and we need a price point that doesn't deindustrialise our country. We need manufacturing here, so we do, and electricity is a major input to manufacturing, and it needs to be at a price point that makes us competitive. So there are a number of reasons why we need to get this sort of reliability and stability and price point right.
Now, looking at the survey data we've got here through JWS, it does appear there's a stronger sentiment for our listeners towards this conversation about nuclear than in metropolitan Adelaide as well. Regional Australians perhaps understand their needs not only on the energy front but on the minerals extraction front as well.
Yeah, and I think regional Australia, it's where a lot of our operations are, also understand that we've got a very stringy network. So if they do want electricity, if they're not connected to the grid, it's a very expensive process to get connected to the grid. And in fact, it's your grids that tend to go off first before metropolitan Adelaide. So I think regional people living in the regions really understand that this electricity is pretty important for their day-to-day lives, and we've got to get it right.
Well, I guess also regional South Australians also understand the poles and wires that have to crisscross their farms, etc. If we rewire the grid as we have been, whereas I gather from what we're talking about, and we're only talking, I gather here, about small modular reactors, not the old school sort of large nuclear plants. If we go down that path, they could probably just sit within existing sites, say at Torrens Island, rather than having to go, in various places like where wind farms have to.
Exactly. And Ricky, this is the conversation that needs to be had, and it's one about small to modular reactors, because size does matter when you're talking about nuclear. So the large cathedrals of power that we see in the newspapers and in media, they're absolutely applicable in places like China and India, where the demand for power is massive. But here in South Australia, we need more nimble power, and it needs to be more dispersed, because we do have such a large land mass and considerably fewer people. So SMRs really fit that build, or micro reactors, and they're really the Teslas of the car manufacturing industry. If you think of the big cathedrals of power as like your T-model Ford, really what we're moving towards is the Teslas. And these SMRs are far more plug and play. They go up to about 300 megawatts of power. But you can get microreactors that are 1 megawatt through to these bigger SMRs. So they really are the future, and that's what we're talking about. Interestingly, in our research, what came through from our research, that actually only 22% of the South Australians surveyed had some understanding of SMRs. So, there's work to be done there, because a lot of people are still thinking, when they think nuclear, they're still thinking these very big fission reactors.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because looking at that data as well, whilst there's that strong 60-something plus percent that support a conversation about nuclear, a similar percentage really don't seem to understand nuclear technology very well. How important in that conversation is it that we explain to the public just what the technology is that is available today?
I think it's really important. I think people really need to understand those facts. We're asking people to come with us on this decarbonisation journey, and I'm, like you, are very focused on making sure people have the information at hand. In that poll, it was also acknowledged that 31%, again a very low number, 31% were aware of the environmental and decarbonisation benefits of nuclear energy. So this is telling us that there's a much larger proportion of the South Australian public that don't understand the decarbonisation benefits of nuclear. So if we do want to decarbonise, and we do want to decarbonise quickly, nuclear is our tool to do that. But only 31% of our population understand it.
Well,
So,
sorry, Rebecca Knoll, I'm running out of time, but I do appreciate that. There is a whole lot of data to dive through that we'll keep doing with you and other people that we're in contact with about this debate. Thanks for joining us today on Flow.
Again, Ricky, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.